welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about study tips for learning medical billing and coding. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. Okay guys, just when I think I have talked a subject so much, I get more questions. So we're going to talk about it again today because of the simple fact that I know a lot of people are starting their journey right about now. Typically, December, January is when people start deciding that they want to learn medical billing and coding. And then I get the panicked emails of, oh my gosh, Blue, where do I begin? Or, oh, I saw your independent study list. And then I saw a new independent study list of yours. And you added pathophysiology. Where do I incorporate that in my learning process? Okay, guys. So I have said many times that when you're learning medical billing and coding, the first thing you do need to learn is your medical terminology, your anatomy, and pathophysiology. Yes, you can incorporate pathophysiology around in that time too. What is pathophysiology? That is the study of the disease process. So you want to make sure that you have that stuff down, or at least you grasp it, you understand it, before you start heading into the coding. You never, ever start learning coding before you learn all your medical terminology and your anatomy. Again, you just want just a general understanding of it. Now, some people may say, well, Blue, I learned medical coding first and then I learned anatomy. Okay, you're kind of going backwards because if you don't understand certain key words, it can cause you to get the incorrect codes. For example, if you don't understand degenerative and what that means, that it's organic. Degenerative means it's something that's in the body that's degrading over time, right? So that's degenerative, right? There's also injuries. If you don't understand that word and you don't understand the difference between the two, and that's part of your pathophysiology, if you don't understand the difference, it's going to cause you to get the wrong codes because you'll see something like tear and you think, oh, that's automatically going to be an injury. But if you didn't pay attention to that word degenerative tear, there's a difference. So that's why learning pathophysiology while you're learning anatomy and medical terminology is so important. You can start off with medical terminology first. Get through a workbook, any workbook. It doesn't matter, guys. You can pick up one from the public library that you can check out for free. And when you do, work through the entire workbook. Even if a lot of that stuff doesn't make sense just yet, it will. But you need to get a broad general understanding of medical terminology before you progress on to trying to learn medical coding. Because if you don't have that down, if you don't have the anatomy down, if you don't have the pathophysiology down, like just that general understanding, the coding is going to be confusing, okay? Don't set yourself up for failure by just trying to dive right into the coding, because it's not just about looking up the codes or just looking up these things. It's about really comprehending what you're reading, because that's very important. Critical thinking is so absolutely necessary in this career field. If you don't know how to critically think, if you don't know how to comprehend what you're reading, it's a problem, guys. And so you always want to start off by being very knowledgeable in what you have to start with first, which is medical terminology, anatomy, pathophysiology. Start with those three first. Now, remember when we were in high school, right? If you're in high school, or if you haven't been in high school in a few years, when I was in high school, we had a thing called a block schedule. So every semester, we would go into a block schedule, right? So we'd have 4 classes, and each was about an hour and a half, right? So that way you had a concentration during that time. You guys can still go back to that same mentality that you were in high school as far as like the block schedule. So meaning you can study more than one subject at a time. I really recommend, if you're going to do something like that, 2, no more than 3, okay, at a time. So medical terminology, anatomy, and pathophysiology. You can totally bundle those together and study those like intently, so that way you don't have to start one and then stop, and then start another and then stop, and then start another and then stop, right? And then by the time you know it, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I forgot all this other stuff. you're incorporating it all throughout your study. Okay, so that's really what you want to do. And when you're studying, I tell you guys, I have said this so many times, I need to get a t-shirt made. 20 hours per week. If you want to do one day medical terminology, the next day pathophysiology, and the next day anatomy, you can totally do that. Okay, you can switch days, you can switch them off. I tell you guys, do 3.5 hours per day, not in one sitting. Definitely not. 1 hour at a time, and then you stop. You take a 15-minute break, 30-minute break, an hour break, whatever you want to, but you always stop after 1 hour, okay? Minimum you should be studying is 30 minutes. Because if you say, well, I do 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, sometimes a lot of that start and stop is going to kind of mess you up. So I recommend going 30 minutes minimum at a time, up to max an hour at a time. If you want to do 10 minute, that is up to you guys. It's up to you. I'm just saying what I recommend. And as somebody who is a studier, I study, okay? And I have found that these things helped me to not get burnt out, to be able to absorb a lot of this information a lot easier, because it's very, very easy to start getting overwhelmed with all the things that you know you have to study. But again, if you're doing like a block schedule and you say, okay, I'm going to do medical terminology, anatomy, and pathophysiology, this part of my study, whether it's 3 months, 4 months, whatever, for that portion, that's going to lay a very, very firm foundation for you once you start getting into the coding part. Okay. So when you're doing that, that's going to help you again build those skills. So that way you learn your ABCs. I always say this. When we were kids, right, in elementary school, and you know how the teacher had the border around the room with all the letters and the numbers, it is the same thing we have to learn again when we're learning all of this anatomy, medical terminology, and pathophysiology. We have to know what doctors know while never having gone to medical school as medical coders. This is real. It is real, guys. I don't care who says what. I'm telling you that when you're looking at these documents that are written by these doctors who have gone to school for years, it's going to be like a whole nother language. And you don't want to be that person that's out there being like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Where do I go? When the answers are right here, guys. This is what you have to do. You have to actually show up and do this stuff. You have to spend the time to learn your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words when you're learning medical terminology, okay? That is learning medical terminology. And working through a workbook, okay? Then, of course, with your anatomy, at least get a general understanding of where the bones are. Then you can do the organs. Then, you can do other things, okay? You can go more deeper, all right? Then you can do muscles and things like that. But you really want to start off with that foundational basics, okay? So that way you can be like, okay, I understand where this is. I understand where that is. And it's not going to be so much, because you can build on that knowledge later on when you are working or when you're going through your independent study. You can continue to build on other things. But again, getting a good general understanding is really going to help you, all right? And then pathophysiology. There are so many fun games out there, guys, that you can do to help you learn pathophysiology. You can go online and you can just Google pathophysiology and you'll see a lot of resources pop right up. I get a lot of requests for people saying, well, I want specific books and I want this and I want that. Guys, no. Because I have put all of those books that I recommend in the description box below. And I still get people who complain and say, those books are too expensive. Okay, well, you could check them out at the public library, or you can find a reasonable book that is comparable to that book. Okay, guys, it's very easy to do. But, a lot of times people just want the stuff handed to them. I'm not doing that, guys, because that's not teaching y'all to fish figuratively, right? If I just spoon feed you all of this stuff, that's not going to prepare you for when you get in the real world and you get around these veteran coders that are not going to want to spoon feed you either. They're going to expect you to know how to do your research. That's why I'm helping y'all now. I give y'all the basics, in the description box, So look in the description box so that way you can find all of that information, and let your fingers do the walking through Google. If you say, okay, I need to learn and study pathophysiology, what are some resources? You go right into Google and you say pathophysiology study resources, and you'll see a lot of recommendations pop up, even more so than what I know. You can look at YouTube. YouTube has a lot of great and fun channels about pathophysiology. Crash Course is one of my most favorite channels. And there's a lot of other ones. JJ Medicine is another one that is really fantastic for learning anatomy and pathophysiology and all of those things. So take the time to look through YouTube, guys. YouTube has a lot of resources. And now a lot of people are telling me, well, Blue, you have so many videos. Yes, but all the titles are there. And you can just go to my landing page and be able to just look and see whatever video is going to grab your attention, because they're all there. And I do give the general title for what I talk about. And there's a lot of resources that I list in the description box. I try to leave a description in every single description box of all of my videos. So that way it'll help you guys. And you don't have to click on those links, okay? Whatever you do, you don't have to click on those links. The links are my affiliate links through Amazon. They're my affiliate links, but you can see the title there. I don't make it a mystery of like, oh, what did she post? No, I tell you what the title is, and then I give you that link. So you don't have to click on the link if you don't want to. Guys, I'm not here to sell you anything when it comes to those things. It is your choice what you do with it, okay? And here's another side note before I continue on. My calendar is completely booked till the end of the year. I do not have any more spaces for tutoring, for professional coaching, or for resume rewrites at this time. My calendar will open back up in January. So if you're interested, then you can totally reach out then. If you want to book now in December for January, that's totally fine too. My rate and contact information is in the description box below. So if you're interested in that, be sure to reach out. So continuing on. Now, when it comes to those things aside, we already know that's how you do it. You can bundle those, and that's totally fine. Anatomy, medical terminology, and pathophysiology, right? You can even throw pharma in there if you want to, but if you want to wait on pharma, that's totally fine too, okay? But the next thing that you should really focus on, of course, is the reimbursement and HIPAA. HIPAA is so easy to Google, okay? Very easy to Google. And you can also go to CMS, cms.gov. I have talked about this many times, where I've gone over the Medicare Learning Network. There's a lot of really helpful things in there, a lot of articles that are really great. On my Patreon channel, and if you don't know, Patreon is a lot like YouTube. I have listed that as a resource as well. So we do a once a month live study hall where we talk about questions. So if you had questions like that on my Patreon channel and you showed up to the study hall, we can totally go over those, because it is about your questions. And again, my link for Patreon is in the description box below. It is my channel, so I will plug my own channel if I want to. So that aside, it's very easy to find resources for HIPAA and medical billing reimbursement, okay? So take the time to Google those things. That is something that is very important. And when you're looking at the domains, you'll see that covered, reimbursement, and then of course HIPAA and security and privacy and things like that. And those are very easy to Google, all right? Take the time to review those so that way you know, and have a good grasp of HIPAA, have a good grasp of the OIG and what they do, and know what high tech is. Know what all these things are. And again, you can find that at cms.gov. And again, I don't want to hear it when people tell me, oh, there's so much to it. Pick one article, look at it, and then close it and go on to the next one, okay? And see whatever you're interested in. Not all of that stuff is going to pertain to you right now, okay? But if you're interested in specific articles like about HIPAA or high tech or, you know, anything like that, you can always put that into the search engine and it'll bring up all of the articles that it has on CMS. as well. So that way, that's a very good resource to help you. And that way you can know, like, okay, this is what is covering this. And, when we talk about like, the administrative safeguards and all these things, we know what these things mean, right? So physical safeguards, we know what these things are. And all of those things are covered on the CMS website, okay? So that's something that you have to know. And when we talk about reimbursement, again, a lot of that is going to be on the CMS website too, all right? And then, of course, we get into the coding part. The coding part should always go at the end because all of your foundational knowledge is already built on, okay? You start with, I recommend starting off with ICD-10-CM because when you have that big book to work with, and I won't show you guys the big book because everybody tells me it's backwards and I don't want to hear it, guys. I don't. But when you're going through that ICD-10-CM book, the diagnosis, you'll start learning about like the headers and the subheaders and all these things. And then you'll be able to start reading about those coding guidelines. I talk about the coding guidelines a lot, the ICD-10-CM coding guidelines. We had the ICD-10-CM coding guidelines challenge in the month of October. And there was a lot of people who read those guidelines. The goal was to read them 4 times in the month of October. That is 1 time per week. Now, if you're studying, it's great to incorporate that as part of maybe 30 minutes of reading, just incorporating that. Doesn't matter where you are because it's not going to make sense until you get into the real world. But the more repetitiveness you have with those guidelines, the better off you'll be. So that's why I say if you want to incorporate that, you can totally do that. But make sure that you're keeping yourself organized so that you don't get overwhelmed. Because a lot of times people start overthinking all these things. I got to learn this, I got to learn that. No, you have to learn the subjects that are right in front of you, okay? So taking the time to read those guidelines throughout is really going to help you to understand a lot of those things. But starting off with the diagnosis coding is really going to lay a good, firm foundation of, okay, I know I have to look stuff up in the index, and then I look it up in the tabular section. And it's the same way when you get into CPT. Index, tabular section. ICD-10 PCS, if you are taking any of the inpatient coding exams, the CCA, the CCS, or the CIC, you would be learning about ICD-10 PCS. Again, you can look things up in the index and then go back to the tabular. The only difference between ICD-10 PCS and ICD-10-CM, of course, the fact that ICD-10-CM is the diagnosis and ICD-10 PCS is the inpatient procedures. But with ICD-10 PCS, once you start getting familiar with those tables, then if you know exactly where you need to go, you can jump exactly to that portion of the book. So that's what's very unique and different about ICD-10 PCS. But when you get into it, you will understand that it is a completely different animal. It is not like CPT where all of those codes are instantly built. With ICD-10 PCS, you are building those codes. And it is going to be based on, the approach and based on the body parts and all these other things and the intent of it all. And so there's a lot more moving parts, I think, when it comes to ICD-10 PCS. But if you are watching the independent study video or any of my other tip videos about how to study those things, it will help you because I've said many times in the back of the Optum, now it's not an ad for Optum, but I love Optum. Optum, if you get the ICD-10 PCS book from Optum, the spiral bound version, in the back of that book, there is Appendix M, and it has the whole list of inpatient procedures that you can look up, and then it has the answer key in the back as well. So once you start practicing through there, that's going to help you to know how to look stuff up in the book. You'll become faster with that book, and it is about practice. The more practice that you get looking up the codes, the better off you'll be because the faster you'll be able to move through that book. And I always recommend not tabbing, writing, highlighting your book. I don't care what anybody else says. I want strong coders. I want y'all to be strong. I want y'all to be proficient with those books. The tabs become a handicap as far as like it's going to make you tear your pages and then you're having to look at these tabs all the time, trying to figure out where you got to go and stuff like that, instead of just opening it up and then going right to where you need to go. People who are practicing with their books are going to be able to do that a lot easier than having to sit here and look at all these tabs and trying to like get on these training wheels and try to figure the stuff out when it's not even necessary, guys. Okay, so don't do that to yourselves. You want to make sure that you're giving yourself all the tools you need to be powerful with looking up codes and looking up these codes, and that comes with practice. And writing all over your books is ridiculous, guys. Why do you do that? These books are written by doctors and scholars who know what they're doing. You just have to learn to trust the book. You have to learn to look at the book and read it, not write all over it. Because when you're in that exam, number one, if you're taking an AHIMA exam, they do not allow excessive writing in the books. They can tell you, no, you cannot use these books, and you will forfeit all that money. And if you don't believe me, if you say, well, no, okay, no, I don't want to hear it. Because if you look at the Kennedy Hand Guide on the AHIMA website, it says excessive writing is not allowed, okay? And again, you're not going to have time to read your notes. You're not. So don't write all over, don't highlight and stuff. If you are done with your test and you're working at a place and you want to do all that writing because it helps you, then that's something that's different. But I'm talking to students who don't need to be writing in their books. I've never written in my books from the time that I first started in school, because when back in the day, AHIMA did not allow writing at all, okay? And I was not about to forfeit anything, that I was paying to take this test. So, that's the thing. You don't want to lose that money just because you're writing excessively in that book. And then by the time I see people who write in the book so much that you can't even see where the original codes were at. And you can't even see the original notes that were there. It's just too much, guys. And then to be doing all that writing when you should be learning to use the book is a waste of time. Okay, it's a waste of time to be doing all that writing, especially when you should be practicing with the book. That's just my advice anyway, guys, okay? So, it's not hard, guys. It's not hard. All you have to do is show up. But that's the hardest part. The hardest part for some is just showing up, because they think this is something that's easy. They think this is something they could do as a side hustle, which it irritates me so bad when I hear people say that, because it's not a side hustle. We have to know too much for it to be a side hustle, especially for my new folks that are coming in. This is not easy like you think it is. And whoever is trying to sell you this thing and, oh yeah, it's really easy, you just have to push through whatever the doctor selected. The doctors, PAs, nurse practitioners, any other qualified healthcare professional that is documenting on these records, they're not medical coders. If they are, it's very few and far in between. But that's not their purpose. Their purpose is to take care of the patients. The reason that we have a job is because we are the coders. And that is what we do. Or if you're doing billing or whatever, and you're doing the dual duty of biller and coder. It is what we do. It is our job to make sure that everything is correct and everything's right, and we're selecting the correct codes, we're selecting the correct procedure codes. It doesn't matter if the physician says, I want this code. If they don't understand what that code all entails, and that there's a better code, there's a code that is more applicable to the situation, and if you just go along with what the doctor said, you're in the wrong, because it is our ethical duty to code correctly. So whenever they say, well, I want this code, that code, no, if it doesn't fit, we can't put it on there. We have to code what is there. And that is when you educate them. Actually, this is the procedure according to your documentation. This is the code that is happening in this procedure and this documentation here. Now, if there's something else that he's saying that he did, and maybe he doesn't understand that there's a difference, then that's when you have to talk to them about that, okay? But that's for later on down the road. You want to just concentrate on one thing at a time, guys. Don't try to overwhelm yourself with too much. go through the independent study video, look at the syllabus, add on anything that you want to, extend the time if you need to, lessen the time if you need to, okay? Or if you're coming in with, that you used to be a nurse or a tech, and you already have your medical terminology and all that good stuff, it's good to get a refresher. But if you don't need it, then you don't need it. You can move on to the next subject and spend a little bit more time learning some of the other stuff. But that's all I got to say today because I'm almost out of time. So best of luck to you out there, guys. Again, take a look at the description box. It has all of the information. Take a look at my Instagram page. I do have like a study schedule, posted from my older posts where I break down the hours. If you want to follow that, you totally can. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.